In August of 2017, people across North America planned ahead for a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to watch a total solar eclipse. Here's a reference to the 2017 eclipse in an article about a previous one, 99 years earlier. For centuries, humans have used math and science to make predictions about our universe.
Certainly by the end of the 19th century, scientists felt that we were living in a basically Cartesian universe, in which if you had some omniscient being who knew the positions and velocities of all the particles in the universe, in principle, that being would know what would happen for all time.
But if that's true, why are some things in our world still so hard to predict, even in an era of supercomputers and big data? If we can predict an eclipse a century in advance, why can we only predict the weather about a week or two in advance? We know this system is based on the same physical laws as the rest of our universe, but it seems random. The study of systems which look random but aren't is called chaos theory. And one of its key pioneers was an MIT meteorologist named Lorenz.
This is weather, one of nature's ever-changing mysteries.
During World War II and the decades that followed, computers allowed scientists to take major steps forward in weather prediction.
Weather, that's something we'd all like to do something about, isn't it? And so tonight we've brought you down here to Remington Rand's New York Computing Center in order that we might show you that something actually is being done about it.
Lorenz graduated from Harvard as a math major and earned his master's degree in math before the war changed his plans. He served in the Air Force, which had a high demand for weather forecasters, so he studied meteorology as part of a special program at MIT. After the war, he completed his doctorate in MIT's meteorology department and later joined the faculty, working alongside pioneers in weather prediction, such as Norm Phillips and Jules Charny. Lorenz wanted to create a set of numbers representing variables like temperature and wind velocity that resembled real weather, so he could use it to test different approaches to forecasting. He enlisted the help of an early computer called the Royal McBee LGP30 and math majors who would train on the job as programmers. One of them was Margaret Hamilton, who would later write the code for the Apollo missions to the moon. In 1961, Lorenz was working with a set of equations that represented a simplified version of the atmosphere with 12 variables that changed over time. The computer calculated the values for each moment in time by applying the equations to the values from the previous moment. And Lorenz watched how they progressed. He needed to be sure that, like real weather, they did not follow a repeating pattern. In some cases, Lorenz's team needed to reprint part of the simulation, so they would restart it from an earlier point by entering the numbers from an earlier printout. Since they used the same numbers and equations, they expected to see the same results, but sometimes they didn't. In some cases, the second run would look very different from the first as it progressed. At first, Lorenz thought the computer was malfunctioning, but he eventually found the source of the error. While the computer's memory stored numbers with 6 decimal places, it printed them with only 3 decimal places, so the values he entered contained tiny errors. Lorenz was observing that in some systems, tiny changes in the present can lead to big changes in the future. Today, we can create models of the atmosphere that go far beyond Lorenz's columns of numbers. In this model from MIT, the white lines represent a bunch of balloons released from approximately the same point. Eventually, the balloons diverge along very different paths because of the small differences in their starting points.
Change the initial condition ever so slightly, infinitesimally slightly. The two trajectories seem to go along with each other, and then they diverge, and they diverge exponentially fast. So that is chaos. It means that you have to know a system with infinite precision to be able to predict it infinitely in time.
This is what scientists now call sensitive dependence on initial conditions, and it wasn't a completely new idea. As far back as the 1880s, the great French mathematician Henri Poincaré observed something similar while studying the problem of 3 objects in space, all affected by each other's gravity.
And he was always looking for, what's the most simple set of equations that exhibit this chaotic property.
Lorenz found a set of 3 equations, a simplified version of equations used to model convection, with only 3 variables that change over time. Let's try graphing them in 3 dimensions on a modern computer. The location of the first point is arbitrary. With each point after that, the computer steps forward in time by calculating the position of the next point based on the position of the previous one. It seems to change direction at random, and it never crosses the same point twice. If it did, that would be the beginning of a repeating pattern. This type of system is now known as a strange attractor, and this particular one is known as the Lorenz attractor. Now, let's try drawing 100 points at random locations and applying the equations to each of them. At first, it looks pretty random, but soon a familiar form emerges. The trajectories that begin on the edges seem to speed off in random directions, but all those that begin within a certain space end up in the attractor. That's why it's called an attractor. But it's a strange attractor because they never actually converge. Once it reaches the attractor, each trajectory continues on its own unique path, and they'll never cross. That means their futures are still being determined by their start values. When Lorenz presented this work at a conference in 1963, he ended his talk with an anecdote about a meteorologist who asked whether the flap of a seagull's wings could change the weather forever.
What he showed was that the appearance of randomness could be well understood within a simple framework of deterministic systems, and that it didn't require excessive complexity at all. It just required one ingredient. The system had to somehow be behaving nonlinearly. What it means for the system to behave nonlinearly is that responses aren't proportional to the forces on things.
Let's take a look at a pendulum. This is a nonlinear system that's periodic, meaning it follows a repeating pattern. If we start it twice from approximately the same point, we get approximately the same behavior. Now let's try 2 pendulums connected end to end, a nonlinear system that's also non-periodic. If we start it twice from approximately the same position, we get radically different behavior over time. This is what Lorenz called deterministic chaos. Deterministic because its future is determined by physical laws, although it seems random. If weather works this way, that would explain why it is proven so difficult to predict. But what if we could scan our entire planet with extreme precision? As we drastically reduce the errors in our measurements, won't we eventually be able to predict the weather much further in advance? In work published in 1969, Lorenz returned to the question of the seagull's wing by taking a closer look at how tiny motions in the air scale up over time to affect huge systems, and how errors in small-scale measurements evolve into large-scale errors in prediction. He proposed a mathematical model of how this might work and found something surprising. The systems in his model could only be predicted up to a specific point in the future. Beyond that, reducing the initial error wouldn't increase the predictability. Lorenz didn't know for sure that the atmosphere behaves this way, and we still don't. But his model had major implications, because it showed a future determined by physical laws may be no different from one that is completely random, in terms of our ability to predict it beyond a certain point. This was a major challenge to the idea of a Cartesian universe.
And the whole idea that where certain systems have these finite prediction horizons that you can't go beyond, that was really new. Nobody really imagined that to be the case.
When Lorenz presented this work at a conference in 1972, the organizer didn't receive his talk title in time, so he suggested one. Does the flap of a butterfly's wings in Brazil set off a tornado in Texas? So the butterfly, instead of the seagull, became the image most associated with his work.
It's had an increasingly profound effect in a number of disciplines.
In its first 10 years, Lorenz's 1963 paper was cited in about 10 other publications. Since then, it's been cited over 9,000 times in papers from nearly every field of science. In 1987, a popular book by James Gleick introduced the world to the work of Lorenz and other chaos pioneers, and the butterfly effect became part of popular culture.
The butterfly effect is a theory according to which the smallest thing, such as a butterfly flapping its wings, can create a series of events leading to a catastrophe, such as a tornado.
Scientists continue to create mathematical models of more nonlinear systems, And if those models are correct, deterministic chaos can be found in some fascinating places, including financial markets, as well as the eye movements of people with certain brain disorders, in the onset of sickle cell disease in the human body, and in the fluctuations of human and animal populations. In 1992, scientists at MIT used a supercomputer to simulate our entire solar system almost 100 million years into the future and found it couldn't be predicted reliably beyond about 12 million years. Beyond that, planets could collide with other objects or be ejected from the system. So even the motions of the planets, which humans have predicted for centuries, are not quite as simple as we thought. Friends describe Ed Lorenz as a humble man and not much of a self-promoter. It wasn't until fairly late in his career that the world began to recognize him as a pioneer of a new field. He received the prestigious Kyoto Prize in Basic Sciences in 1991 and passed away in 2008. Future generations will likely remember him as one of the great scientists who fundamentally changed our understanding of our universe.